welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into a stack of sources today,
Right.
really focusing on a critical sector in Europe, electric mobility,
Mhm.
specifically in Italy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case.
It really is. Our sources, we're looking at Motus-E, AFRY, Mobility Portal Europe. They all seem to paint this picture of, well, a major European economy that's acting as a genuine anomaly.
Hmm.
While the rest of the continent seems to be electrifying pretty rapidly, Italy seems to be struggling profoundly to keep pace.
Yeah.
So our mission today, really, is to unpack the reasons for this lag, maybe diagnose some of the core ideological, economic problems, and then try to map out the path needed to hit that 2035 zero-emission goal.
And we really have to start with just how big that gap is, because the numbers, well, they're immediately quite challenging, aren't they?
Yeah,
I mean, look at the first 8 months of 2023. Italy's full electric vehicle market share was what, just 3.9%?
just 3.9.
Now compare that to Germany, nearly 1 in 5 new cars, 18.6% fully electric, or France, 15.4%. It's a stark difference.
That is staggering. I mean, we're talking about the third largest economy in the EU moving at, what, less than a quarter of the speed of its neighbors?
Exactly. And what's really interesting, and this is what Motus-E calls the core Italian anomaly, is that this difference holds up even when you try to control for wealth.
Right.
So if you looked just at northern Italy, where, per capita income is pretty comparable to France, the EV market share there was still only 4%.
Still only 4%.
Wow. So
Yeah.
this isn't just an affordability problem. It seems to be something more structural.
Okay, let's dig into that structural problem straight away then, because
Yeah.
we're not just talking about being a little bit behind, are we?
Yeah.
Mobility Portal Europe noted that back in July 2025, Italy was at 4.9% market share. Meanwhile, nearby EU countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, they were already past 30%.
30%. Yeah.
The gap isn't closing, it's actually getting wider.
The underlying resistance is significant. Now, the sources do acknowledge some positive signs, like there was a 37.3% increase in BEV registrations in August 2025 compared to the previous August.
Okay, so some growth.
Some growth, yes, but the overall market trajectory is just flat compared to the rest of Europe. The country is growing, but it's way slower than the curve really requires.
And the diagnosis from Motus-E, the industry association, it's particularly sharp here. They suggest it's down to multiple causes, but they characterize the basic resistance as almost ideological. What does that actually mean in practice? When you say ideological, are we talking like political rhetoric, media influence, or is it real active consumer resistance to the change?
Well, it seems to be a mix of all three, really, but it seems rooted in regulatory uncertainty and just the amount of confusing or even misleading information circulating about, the viability and the cost of EVs.
Right.
The public conversation hasn't really been grounded in the economic and scientific facts. And that kind of ideological pushback, it stalls the necessary policy action, it dampens consumer enthusiasm, and that translates directly into those poor sales figures we just mentioned.
So, if the government and the industry don't really get ahead of this ideological thing, the consequences could be pretty severe.
Oh, extremely severe. I mean, in a global mobility landscape that's clearly shifting towards electric, Motus-E put out a stark warning. They said lagging behind could be fatal for the Italian industry.
Fatal? Wow.
Yeah. It's fundamentally an economic argument that's kind of wrapped up in a policy failure. The time for debate seems to be over. What's needed now is clear, science-based economic guidance.
Okay, that's the diagnosis. Now let's talk practical barriers, because for the average Italian consumer, and also for the charging providers trying to serve them, the first thing they hit is cost. Let's call this hurdle number one, the cost conundrum. Even though EV prices are generally coming down, that initial purchase price is still the dominant hurdle for consumers, isn't it? When you break down the market, something like 84% of available electric vehicles cost between $20,000 and $80,000 more. But here's the crucial comparison. The segment under 20,000 euros. That's what drives the vast majority of traditional petrol and diesel car sales in Italy.
Right, the volume market.
Exactly. But that segment is only 1% of the current EV offering. Just 1%.
And that tiny market offering at the lower end, it directly makes the failure of the incentive structure even worse.
Oh, so?
Well, for instance, when the 2023 incentive cap was set at 42,700 euro for a battery electric vehicle, it immediately cut out 54% of all the models available.
Over half the market just excluded.
Yeah. The subsidies were basically designed to target maybe a small slice of the kind of premium market, not the volume market where the real need actually was.
Yeah.
And then the situation in 2024 was, well, almost chaotic. It perfectly showed the mismatch between policy design and actual consumer demand. Even with those restrictive price caps, the demand for affordable EVs was so high that when the $200 million in funds for cars were finally released, they ran out in just 9 hours.
9 hours. That sounds less like a policy rollout and more like, I don't know, a Black Friday sales stampede.
Pretty much.
So what does that tell us about the pent-up demand that the current system just isn't meeting?
It tells us the demand is absolutely there, the moment the price is right. But the speed those funds vanished proves two things. One, the total pot of incentives was way too small for the long-term need. And two, they were structured poorly. There was no continuity, no certainty for consumers or dealers. That kind of volatility just completely undermines any long-term industry planning.
Okay, so that's the purchase price barrier for consumers.
Yeah.
But then the charging point operators, the CPOs, they face their own high-cost challenge. This is more of a structural barrier, right? Detailed in that AFRY study.
Yeah, this is a really crucial sort of hidden barrier. AFRY found that CPOs in Italy face structurally higher energy costs for public charging. It's because of differences in energy prices, grid fees, other charges. And specifically, to get the high-speed charging, you need to connect at medium voltage. But the way the utilities structure the tariffs means CPOs are paying these high fixed power charges regardless of how many cars actually charge in any given hour.
Ah, right. So if they have low charger utilization, which you'd expect in a developing market like Italy, where EV numbers are still pretty low, they're essentially paying for huge grid capacity they don't actually use.
Exactly. Which makes every single kilowatt hour they sell potentially prohibitively expensive.
It's a classic chicken and egg situation then.
Totally. They can't lower their prices easily to attract more customers if their basic operating energy costs are disproportionately high, simply because not enough cars are using the chargers yet.
So what are the proposed fixes? Motus-E must have some ideas.
They do. The Motus-E Manifesto lays out some clear policy fixes for both sides of this cost problem. First, review the purchase incentives, raise that price cap, maybe extend them to company cars and rentals too. And second, critically, tackle those high structural energy costs for CPOs. Align Italy's costs more with other major EU countries to actually encourage profitability and investment in charging.
Right. Makes sense. Let's shift gears now to barrier number 2. This mix of charging tech, range, and the infrastructure mismatch. Because while cost is huge, that consumer hesitation is often fueled by range anxiety, isn't it?
Still a big factor, yeah.
The good news, though, is that technology is just advancing at incredible speed. We've seen average range jump from, 320 kilometers in 2020 to around 350 in 2023. And the next-gen cars are aiming for 400, 450 kilometers. But here's what gets really interesting on the tech side. CATL just presented their Shenzhen Plus battery. They're promising a game-changing 1,000-kilometer range.
1,000 kilometers.
And the ability to charge 600 kilometers worth in just 10 minutes. Plus, you've got Toyota actively targeting 2027 for mass introduction of solid-state batteries.
Okay, hold on. If CATL is really promising a 1,000-kilometer range in the next few years, doesn't that basically kill range anxiety as a primary barrier? It sounds like it just leaves us dealing with the cost and those infrastructure tariff issues we just talked about.
It certainly should. I mean, that kind of range changes everything.
Yeah.
But then the question becomes, is the infrastructure actually ready to deliver on those new capabilities? And that's where we see a mismatch today.
Yeah, that's the crucial point. Currently, only a minority of EV models can actually make use of high-power charging, or HPC. Only about 36% of BEV models on the market can charge at 150 kilowatt or DC or more, and only 2% can handle 300 kilowatt or plus.
Only 2% for the really fast stuff.
Right, and that limited compatibility today, it reduces the incentive for charging operators to invest heavily in that top-tier, highest-power infrastructure, which, could slow down the overall expansion of HPC needed for those future cars.
And yet, Italy has this really strange infrastructure paradox, doesn't it? We hear they're lagging France and Germany badly in the total number of chargers. But the sources also suggest they have great coverage. How does that work?
It's a deeply misleading number, really. So in 2023, Italy had a very high density of public charging points relative to the tiny number of EVs actually on the road, about 21 charging points per BEV, which sounds fantastic on paper.
That was great, yeah.
And furthermore, 99% of Italian territory supposedly has a charger within a 20-kilometer radius. So technically, the coverage is there for the current, very small fleet.
But that high density just confirms Italy is still right at the beginning of the adoption curve. The moment sales actually start to climb significantly, that existing infrastructure is going to be instantly overwhelmed, right?
Precisely. The total number of public points, around 51,000 in 2023, is way behind France and Germany, who both have around 120,000 points each.
Big difference.
Huge. And to make it worse, there's a regional imbalance. 58% of all those public charging points are concentrated up in northern Italy. That leaves the south significantly underserved.
Okay, so let's look ahead then. The road ahead to 2035. Motus-E has outlined some scenarios, projecting Italy will have somewhere between 9.8 million and 11.4 million EVs on the road by 2035. That would make up about 22 to 26% of the total circulating fleet.
Still feels quite low for 2035 compared to targets, but a big jump from now.
A massive jump. And if that forecast holds, it means a huge, really fundamental shift in lifestyle, specifically around where we refuel our cars.
How so?
Well, currently, domestic home charging handles about 64% of the energy demand for EVs. By 2035, that's projected to drop significantly down to just 27%.
Wow, that's a big drop. So where does the energy come from?
Well, workplace charging is forecast to grow dramatically, covering up to 34% of the total energy demand. And public charging covers the rest, about 39%.
Okay, this isn't just about numbers then. This is really about how people live. If domestic charging plummets like that, it means we're shifting from cars being charged overnight in the garage to being charged maybe while we're at work.
Exactly. It turns the EV from just a personal overnight asset into potentially a core part of the corporate and fleet life cycle. But that future relies heavily on mandated investment, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The government isn't building all this on its own. There are regulatory drivers and huge investment pipelines pushing this forward. We should probably mention the acronyms funding this.
Yeah, let's talk PNRR and AFIR.
Right. So the PNRR, that's Italy's National Recovery and Resilience Plan, mostly EU recovery money, allocates a massive 713 million specifically for about 21,400 fast chargers by 2026.
Okay, that sounds promising.
It does, although it's worth noting the initial bidding process in 2023 had some setbacks. Only about 3,000 of the planned 21,000 urban charging points were actually assigned then. So progress has been a bit slow, reinforcing that point about policy execution challenges.
Right. And then there's the EU-wide regulation providing the bigger push.
Yes, the AFIR mandates are absolutely key here. AFIR is the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation. And basically, it removes national wiggle room on building out infrastructure along major routes.
Oh, it forces the issue.
It forces the issue. These rules require the 10T road network, the main European transport arteries, be rapidly covered. For light vehicles like cars, this means high-power charging hubs delivering a total of 600 kilowatts need to be installed every 60 kilometers by 2035.
Every 60 kilometers. That's quite dense.
It is. And this infrastructure growth is required pretty much regardless of any current domestic policy hiccups. The overall goal is to get Italy somewhere between 198,000 and 239,000 public charging points by 2035. And this will be led by HPC, the high-power stuff. That's forecast to cover over 30% of public charging energy needs by then.
And that reflects the tech improving, too.
Exactly. It reflects the engineering challenge in progress. The average maximum DC power that passenger cars can accept is expected to rise from about 135 kilowatts today to 210 kilowatts by 2035. The cars will demand faster charging.
And beyond just plugging in, we're also seeing some, well, disruptive trends that could potentially bypass this whole traditional infrastructure plan, right? Things like wireless charging, mobile charging, maybe even battery swapping.
Yeah, companies like NIO have pioneered battery swapping globally, and you see Italian partnerships like XEV and Eni exploring it locally, too. It's definitely part of the future risks to watch.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. The core tension seems pretty clear. Italy has, paradoxically, great infrastructure density right now for its current small fleet. But it's held back by those high operational energy costs for the CPOs and these politically driven policy hurdles, especially around incentives that just exclude affordable models.
Right. That sums it up well.
However, you've got this dual force of rapidly improving battery tech, which is basically solving range anxiety, and these firm EU regulatory mandates, like AFIR. That means the infrastructure is going to scale up quite rapidly, it seems. Policy just has to stabilize and, crucially, address those structural costs to stop the Italian auto industry from suffering what Motus-E called that potentially fatal decline.
Which, raises an important final question, I think. Considering the high number of long-term rentals making up 36% of all EV registrations in 2023, basically as a way for consumers to avoid those high upfront purchase costs.
Right, leasing is popular.
Could leasing and fleet solutions actually be the real immediate catalyst here? Could they bypass the current weaknesses in the incentive system?
Hmm, that's an interesting thought. But isn't that just sort of kicking the can down the road? I mean, if fleets are buying the cars now, the government still hasn't really solved the core affordability problem for the average Italian family, has it? The goal isn't just to sell cars to fleets, it's mass adoption.
True, but fleets do something crucial. They inject a significant volume of used EVs into the market 3 or 4 years later. That dramatically lowers the average cost of entry for families down the line.
Ah, okay, so it tackles affordability indirectly.
Indirectly, yes. And maybe more immediately, it provides the scale needed right now to increase CPO utilization, which finally allows them to potentially lower charging costs because their structural costs per charge go down. So the solution might actually lie more in the sales channel rather than just waiting for the perfect government subsidy.
So a shift from focusing only on subsidies for new individual buyers towards enabling fleet turnover to really fuel that crucial used EV market. That's a powerful insight to end on.
Something to think about.
Definitely. Well, we hope this deep dive gave you the shortcut you needed to understand the really complex dynamics of the Italian EV market right now. If you appreciated this analysis, please make sure to follow the channel for more explorations into complex subjects like this one.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.